What's up, traders? Anthony Crudele here, and thank you for tuning in to the Futures Radio Show podcast. Jam-packed show for you guys today. I'm so excited to bring you my guest. She's my new favorite follow on Twitter. She's smart. She's hilarious. Her name is Allison Reichel. She's a PhD candidate in economics and consultant, and also the editor of a Substack called Rational Reasoning. Highly recommend you check out that Substack. It's really, really good. Today we talked about the FOMC meeting. Talked about inflation and why she believes that inflation should be transitory if the Fed responds appropriately. We talked about what are the best investments right now to fight against inflation. We talked a little bit about Latin America, specifically Venezuela. We talked about CPI. We talked about transportation. Never really do we talk about transportation on this show, but it's a hot topic right now, so we had to talk about it. And of course, we talked a lot about crypto, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Allison also gives us some cryptos that she's currently holding and what her process is for looking for new cryptos to invest in. Remember, Futures Radio Show is sponsored by CME Group, and on May 3rd, everybody, micro Bitcoin futures are coming to CME Group. They're going to be 1/10 the size of a Bitcoin, not 1/10 the size of the current CME Group contract. 1/10 the size of a Bitcoin. To learn more about micro Bitcoin futures, go to activtrader.cmegroup.com. You can listen to Futures Radio Show podcast anywhere where podcasts are available, but if you want to watch Futures Radio Show, you can check us out on YouTube or anthonycrudele.com. This show is also sponsored by Trading Technologies, TradeStation, and FTSE Russell. The Russell 2000 is a key benchmark for small cap U.S. stocks. Be sure to check out the E-Mini Russell 2000 futures symbol RTY and micro E-Mini Russell 2000 futures symbol M2K. To learn more about FTSE Russell and their products, please visit FTSERussell.com. Allison, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. You know, I was following you on Twitter a few months ago, and I saw some of your comments. I'm like, she's smart and she's funny. I got to have her on the podcast. And I was telling you before you came on, I said, in order to be smart in the world of finance, you got to really know what's going on, because you got to be able to make jokes of what's going on in this world of financial markets.
Yeah, try to educate people through the humor.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, we're going to get into talk a lot about actually the Fed, as we're recording right now, just came out with a statement. So the FOMC statement, I'm going to talk about that with you in just a moment. But if you could just give everybody a quick little bit of a background on yourself and what it is that you're currently doing.
Yeah, so I'm a PhD candidate in economics at George Mason University, fielding in industrial organization and experimental economics. I was a consultant to the World Bank for about a year and a half, and I was a fellow at the Center for a Secure Free Society, focusing on Latin American growth for about 3 years. I'm now consulting a hedge fund and doing some media stuff, focusing a lot on crypto and trying to just educate people on the general macroeconomy and how that fits into finance.
Oh, yeah. And I'm glad that you mentioned crypto, because we're definitely going to get into that later in the interview. So young, and you have a great understanding of what's going on already, because you could tell just from your tweets. I mean, in order to be able to make jokes of this stuff, you have to really, like I said, you have to understand it, because it's just, it's complex.
Yeah, it's definitely, and I found that in teaching people, I never wanted to be an academic, but I wanted to help people learn, because I know like a lot of the stuff that comes out of the Fed is super complicated. But the best way to teach people and to get their attention seems to be through like this comedy that actually has like a solid background, not just fear-mongering inflation, but actually talking about its real uses, like inflation as a hidden tax and stuff like that.
What is one of the questions that people ask you about what's happening? What's the most popular question, I should say, that people are asking you, like maybe your younger friends, about what's happening in the world right now with financial markets?
So I get a lot of questions about inflation, what inflation means, what that means for finance, where to invest based on inflation expectations. A lot of questions actually was very interesting at the beginning of it all. We're asking, well, if people aren't spending, why isn't there inflation? And that made me realize that there was like a very core economics question to address amongst it all, which is, how inflation actually becomes prevalent in economies.
It's interesting that's the most popular question. I mean, obviously, if you look at financial media right now, if you look at Twitter, everybody is really trying to guess whether we're going to get inflation. It's going to get real hot. I mean, I've heard a lot of people talk about we're actually getting ready to get deflation. And then you have the Fed that talks about it's going to be transitory. And speaking of the Fed, I want to read this FOMC announcement and just pick your brain about it and see what you think. It said right now, this is what I'm seeing come across Twitter, was FOMC to continue increasing bond purchases by at least $80 billion a month of treasuries, $40 billion a month of MBS until substantial further progress made on maximum employment and price stability goals.
Yeah, so I think the hawkish risk would have been if they said the opposite of that and started to ease up on the purchasing of bonds. So I think what they're seeing is that we're right on growth targets from the last quarterly outlook.
And let's go back to the inflation side of things. And I asked you this prior to us talking today, and you said that the most popular question you're getting is actually about inflation. So I want to stay there. And you said that you agreed with the Fed that inflation would be transitory if the Fed responded appropriately. Mm-hmm. Explain that.
Yeah, so right now the Fed is engaging in a lot of loose monetary policy that is keeping the interest rate really low, kind of inflating away the debt and straying into more fiscal territory. But so long as, and they released their dot plot with the last quarterly outlook, it looks like they plan on an increase, and this is all, who knows what will change by then, but they plan on an increase to about 1.5% by 2023, and then after that they see it going as high as 3%. So tightening up policy there will definitely be crucial in making sure that the economy doesn't overheat. I have another Substack talking about the overheating of the economy and the Fed response. I think it's really important to remember that right now we are in a time of crisis, and I think a lot of times, especially in crypto markets, people can forget that Powell's adjusted unemployment rate is still about 9.1%. That's what he said a couple months ago. And there's still a great majority of the economy hurting. So when we see these fiscal packages come out, and we see these bumps in M1, M2, they do have a direct use. About 50 to 60% of these fiscal packages were directly related to bills and housing, so bills and rent. So as long as the Fed doesn't continue to stray into that fiscal territory by inflating away the debt, and as long as they do plan on actually keeping the interest rates a little bit more tight later on down the line, I think we'll be okay.
Got it. And it's with a lot of the people that I talk with on this show, it's not really a mixed bag. It's actually most of the people that I talk to would actually say that inflation is just going to run too hot. The Fed, what makes them think they're going to be able to control it? And then Mark Dow and maybe one other person I've spoken to over the last few months said that they actually believed it's transitory, and the Fed, and very similar to what you said, if the Fed responds appropriately. What actually makes us believe that they could actually respond appropriately to everything that's happened up to this point?
Yeah, so that's where I'd like to think it's transitory, but I'm not exactly confident in Powell. And I mean, even talking about how he switched from the 2% inflation targeting to average inflation targeting, that really set the precedent for expectations, I think, looking on the back end of things, because he realized probably well before anybody else did that we were going to surpass that 2% target. So I think trust in the Fed isn't very high right now. And especially they just, removed their M2 on a weekly basis. So it's still available on a monthly basis. We can still see the growth in the monetary base. But I think that they are trying to dim a little bit of transparency, and that could either because they don't want to, deal with all of the fear, uncertainty, and doubt, or it could be because they're also not sure what they're going to do. But I will say we did see a deflationary period from March to May of last year, which says a lot about consumer uncertainty. So it's really about what we see this summer, I think.
I mean, one of my mentors, Ira Harris, he goes, they don't know how this is going to end. I mean, he's been doing this forever. He's like, they're playing along like all of us, and we're counting on them to hopefully, do this the right way. And as traders, all we can do is take the information that is in front of us. I know how so many people like to, they like to complain, or they like to give their strong opinions on what they think will or may happen. And I like to look at what's happening right now. And from the trader's perspective, which is a majority of people listening to this show, what are the plays on it? I know that you mentioned that some of your friends are actually asking you, they ask you about inflation, then they ask you, what's the investment for it? What do you think right now is the play for investment if we think inflation is going to continue to be here, transitory, right? Because for now, like I said, we're going to trade what's in front of us. What would you say are the best places to put money?
Yeah, so crypto is definitely like the modern day hedge against inflation. We've seen crypto markets perform better than they ever have during this period. And anytime Powell mentions inflation, we see these prices really go up. So it has proven to be a really good hedge against inflation. And I think especially because so much focus is on domestic markets and inflation domestically, looking at what's going on in places like Latin America and other parts of the developing world where inflation is high, growth is really low, and they're not expecting anything to rebound until at least mid 2022. Crypto definitely seems like a safe bet on that front.
Interesting that you said crypto, because this is once again where I love talking to all the people that really understand what's happening in the macro world. That's not my strength. My strength is to kind of build a theme and trade off of it. And I've had a majority of the people actually say that what's happening in crypto really has nothing to do with a hedge against inflation. It's just purely speculative, and there's no link and correlation to it. And a lot of people will say that they're coming to that conclusion. They're just wrong. What would you say to them?
Yeah, so I think it's interesting. I think it's hard because I think the only thing that will tell is time. And when, we start to see inflation subside, if the Fed can control for it, what crypto does, I think will be the only concrete proof of whether or not it is a hedge. But I mean, in terms of stocks, I guess, I've been looking at transportation, and I am a transportation economist. So, but that's typically the first, given the overall theme of the pandemic, transportation is definitely one of the first places where we'll see recovery really start to hit. And American Airlines has already come out and said that they have their highest capacity, their highest output since before the pandemic, or since the pandemic started. They're slowly getting towards pre-pandemic levels. Sorry, there's a car alarm going off.
That's okay.
But so transportation for sure. And when you talk about things like inflation, what we'd see is demand pull inflation. Which is when prices rise. So I'm trying to keep this simple, but we're going to see prices rise because demand funnels into the economy very quickly. So if you look at airline ticket prices, right, like you were getting like $20 United tickets from DC to Texas, which is crazy.
Yeah.
Things are definitely back to normal now. Let's back up to $200, $300. And once people actually start funneling back into leisure and transportation, it'll definitely be a sign of recovery.
Coming up in the industry, I remember when I first started to trade on the floor, and then I started to buy stocks. I mean, pretty much every trader I know, and even the guys that weren't traders that were telling me about investments, they always told me, never buy airline stocks, never buy car companies. And you said that you focus a lot on transportation. Do you think that they're good investments now? Has it already played out? Where would you see the investment if you think that that's where there's going to be opportunity with inflation?
Yeah, so it's interesting because I think what we're seeing is similar to what happened after 9/11 in the aviation industry. So it's really survival of the fittest. Delta's proved that it has strong network effects, which is super important. Domestic network effects at that, because when international travel got shut down, we saw United and American hurt a lot, as well as airlines in Latin America. And Southwest it went from a low-cost carrier to a mainline after 9/11. So you see a lot of like smaller carriers that are conventionally seen as low cost really surge and rise to the top because they're able to price on the margin. They're able to price a lot lower. So Alaska's come out and said that they want to outperform Southwest on the West Coast. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Southwest and Alaska both do really well and take over most of the market share from the traditional main four, which is typically seen as being United, Delta, American, and Southwest.
Got it. Now we're going to pause here and we're going to be back in 45 seconds. But For the listeners out there, the traders out there, when we come back, I obviously want to talk more about crypto, and something that we haven't talked about when it comes to hedging against inflation is gold. And I want to see what you think about that and actually a few other things. So hang tight, traders. We'll be back in 45 seconds.
Replace your exchange with TradeStation Crypto. Dealing with multiple exchanges is complicated and it takes time, except with TradeStation Crypto. Because we are not an exchange. We are a broker. You have access to multiple pools of liquidity. All in one platform, in one account, one way. Trade crypto your way. Plus, earn interest on your eligible cryptocurrencies. Get started in one click.
Trade the global markets with Trading Technologies. TT is the world's fastest commercially available futures trading platform, now with integrated tools for advanced options trading, cryptocurrencies, and trade surveillance. Learn more at tradingtechnologies.com. Welcome back, traders. Loving this conversation so far with Allison. And Allison, I want to start off with, you mentioned that you really focused a lot on Latin America, and specifically actually Venezuela, you mentioned to me. I don't think there's a place in the world that experienced probably, I don't know, maybe ever is a strong word, but from what I've read, I think it's one of the craziest things anyone's ever seen in terms of inflation, and that was in Venezuela. Now, obviously, I don't think many of us expect, no matter how hot inflation gets, for that to happen here in the U.S. But what I want to talk to you about is, how did it initially start? What were the first signs that inflation was coming there? Because maybe something that happened there could maybe be an indication, some indications as to what's happening here to see. I mean, like I said, I don't think it's going to get like Venezuela, but it's interesting to know where it really started in Venezuela to really kind of compare what's happening here for maybe some trades or investments in the U.S.
Yeah, so Venezuela definitely was probably the craziest case I've ever studied, probably ever. It was up in the double-digit millions in terms of percent inflation.
Nuts.
And so it's, the traditional start is that the government starts printing money in order to inflate away the debt. And then it spirals out of control as debt accumulates, and Venezuela owed a lot of money to China, Russia, Turkey. And so what was really interesting was to see how that relationship was playing out. We saw Venezuela allowing for oil to be used as collateral. So Russia came in and seized a bunch of oil fields. We saw the funneling out of gold from Venezuela because Venezuela has, it's amongst the top 3 highest gold reserves, or actual physical gold in the world. So Turkey was seizing a lot of their gold. Russia was coming in and taking a lot of gold, but Venezuela was also holding gold in their central bank, which was interesting. And Venezuela also looked to cryptos in order to evade sanctions and to have a sort of a sound money in order to pay back debts, in order to sort of suppress this growing inflation rate. And like I said, it was something crazy high. It definitely showed up in the price of everything. And I think once it hit a certain point, it just spiraled out of control. So I think, looking at the United States, it's hard to draw these really big comparisons just because Venezuela was such a different story with like absolute institutional crumble, the regime's in place, with Maduro being, was he the legitimate leader? Was he the illegitimate leader? But it will be interesting to look at commodities, look at things like gold, see whether or not they do actually continue to carry their value as a hedge against inflation. And then again, like the things like lumber, the price of lumber, the price of agriculture, housing hitting an all-time high for the past 15 years, the highest it's been in 15 years, asset prices. So it's definitely important. And people talk about this a lot in the crypto community to not just look at CPI as sort of an indicator of inflation and what's to come.
Here's my thing with CPI, and there's a bunch of stuff I want to talk about. The thing with CPI is, and I've had Danielle DiMartino Booth on here and Shy Girl and a bunch of people, and I've always asked them this question, and I say, what do you think about the CPI number? And they all tell me, well, we don't love it, but it's what the Fed's using.
Right.
So you don't really, but what do you think about the CPI number?
I would agree with that statement. I think that there's a lot of ways in which it could improve, but it's what we're working with. So long as the Fed continues to use it, that's probably going to be our best bet at seeing where they're at least.
Yeah. And, like I said, I mean, I'm not making any comparison to Venezuela to the U.S. I made that pretty clear. And what I like to do is, the trader in me is always about looking at maybe something that's happening over here and what happened there and what were the trades. And I know some people are going to say he's comparing the U.S. and Venezuela when I say this, but I mean, look at lumber. I mean, that chart is unbelievable. Look at a lot of the softs. I mean, the move in crude oil, I don't think is anything crazy yet. It could be at some point. Obviously it went from negative to where it is now. I mean, the move has been a huge move, obviously. But overall, when I look at it, there are all of these different signs that you see to where it's happening. And I just keep going back to, where's the play from here right now? Do you see those things continuing to happen? Are we already to the point where the transitory is kind of coming off? Because when you look at lumber, you look at softs, gold we've seen.
Even.
Yes.
Some might argue education. Yeah.
So that's kind of what I'm saying. I mean, at this point going forward, it's what is the plays now that you see? I mean, do you think a lot of these are already kind of baked in? I mean, even the airline stocks, I don't look at them a ton, but I know some of my friends that have been trading them and they're like, oh, they've been taking off lately. Is a lot of this stuff already baked in? Are we already kind of, the market's got way ahead of itself? Or is it the beginning or is it the middle? Where do you see that?
Yeah, so in terms of if you want to talk about the economy overheating, I think the analogy that I've been using is that we have a whole box of matches and we keep lighting them and throwing them on a pile of wood. Yeah. And at some point, I think we've started the fire, but I don't know how big it is yet. Especially, so even talking about education, when you're talking about, future expectations and inflation, stuff like that, it's interesting because Biden's recent infrastructure plan, that the American Jobs Plan, a great majority of that creates jobs that don't need a college education, which I think is a great start for sort of suppressing that bubble, but we're not really seeing the bubble suppressed anywhere else. So even if we put a Band-Aid on one wound, it's like we still have 6 bullet holes. So definitely the price of lumber is something to watch. The price of oil, even though it hasn't changed, by some insane amount, it'll definitely be interesting to watch. And I do think crypto will be interesting to watch. Gold as well, but again, I think that becomes more of an issue in countries that are very commodities based. Very minerals based. A lot of the developing world relies more so on that front. So I don't know if we'll see as proportionally speaking, even I don't know if we'll see as big of a change.
Got it. Yeah, no, I agree with that. And let's talk about gold just for a moment, because I definitely want to end the day on crypto because I've just got a lot to talk with you about that. But I mean, gold, what do you think about it?
Yeah, so I think maybe I've progressed way onto the crypto side. So I see crypto as the new digital gold. I actually just got back from editing a manuscript on the gold standard, and the last chapter was on crypto as the new digital gold. I'm not a total anti gold person. I think it still probably is a great hedge against inflation. But I think as we move towards new monetary regimes, we'll start to see that fade out a little bit. And I think as a whole, I'm pretty sure I've seen a report a couple months ago talking about the demand for gold, even as jewelry had started falling in more recent times. So I think that'll also be interesting to watch. I know in places like Asia where gold is used for a lot of events or dinners or gifts, we saw demand fall, obviously because of the pandemic. But it'll be interesting to see if those trends continue and whether or not it remains a store of value.
It's amazing how much the crypto people will butt heads with the gold people, right? I mean, they think, I don't understand why they think that one has to be the exact right answer. I have always really been, since crypto's been a thing, I believe that both have their place.
Yes.
I have stopped trading gold because my P&L told me to. I mean, it doesn't mean I won't buy it again, but I did really well in gold at the end of last year. And this year I've talked about this openly. I've been getting my teeth kicked in it. I've stopped over the past couple of months. And this is where we get into more of crypto. And I've been pretty much almost all I've been trading is Ethereum, some Bitcoin a little bit, but not as much, mostly Ethereum. And I don't look at it. I just keep going back to, I think, the gold crypto debate, I don't look at it as I think they're just so different and I don't really compare them. I think that they both are going to have their place. I just think that gold now has, it's lost its love. It's still a much bigger market than the crypto market. I don't know the exact numbers. I know people talk about how big one is compared to the other and how much more room crypto has to go. But gold to me is just one of those things that it won't matter until it does. Right? Like all of a sudden gold will get hot. And this is where as from the trader in me, is like, you can't just keep buying breaks in it and assume that eventually it's going to work. When it starts to work, it'll probably work much greater than people think. And when it matters again, it will. Until then, I just say, I just kind of put it out there. It doesn't mean that I think it's not going to work. It's just a timing thing. But crypto, I'm so bullish on Ethereum that I almost have, it's hard for me. I don't want to even tweet about it. This is funny because I struggle to tweet. There's a couple guys I talk with and we're like, we're along so much Ethereum that we keep saying we can't talk about it. We're so bullish this. When you look at crypto, which ones do you like? And, talk to us a little bit about which ones that you're invested in.
Yeah, so I'm definitely mostly in Bitcoin, Ethereum. And then I have a lot of like altcoins that either I just see a lot of faith in the company. I really like the projects. Zilliqa as an example, there's this one really, really small token called VersaView, but I'm holding all for the long term. And so I think what'll be really interesting to see that I've seen under development, but not come to the surface yet, is how these cryptos are brought to developing countries, because I think the developing world is where we're really going to see these take off. When you have like Bitcoin Maxi saying, Bitcoin's going to be the new, world reserve currency, and the destruction is going to come from internally from the United States, like the US is going to fudge its own numbers and fudge its own, currency. I don't think that's the case. I think we'll see crypto enter these markets that are really, really weak. Latin America, a lot of Africa, we'll see it grow in popularity and strength. And that's how we'll sort of have the crypto revolution. So when I talk to people about investing in crypto, I always tell them, don't jump on the trends, because we've seen, especially recently after the whole, Dogecoin surge, there were a lot of rug pulls, a lot of cryptos created. Like there's one called like Moon or something. They all have these like things in their name, and people are always really excited, right? Because they have a lot of, FOMO. They want to just jump on and hop on whatever's, going straight up. But I would look more at the long run, in terms of, success of the company, even for short-term trading, because you want something that's, that actually has some sort of stability or good mechanisms backing it.
I look at crypto in two ways. One, in the short term right now for the trading side of things, I've been an S&P trader most of my career. That market right now is so difficult to trade. It's just grinding up and there's no rotation. And people are like, Anthony, why are you trading crypto? I'm like, because it moves. I don't know what to tell you. I go, you don't have to believe in it. It works technically well, and you're seeing follow through. And, because you understand a lot about the economics, you understand a lot about, policy and what happens, in the financial system in this country. I mean, how much do you really believe, and this is the question people always ask me, that crypto could actually have a place here? Because I still think that so many people out there, I don't know how many people in the U.S., I read something the other day, I'm sure I'll get correct on this, there's only like 6% of people maybe in the U.S. even own crypto at this point. There's obviously a ton of possibilities going forward. But a lot of my friends that have a lot of money, they're like, what do I need this for? Why should I invest in this? How is this going to impact my life? And I actually don't have a straight answer for them. What would you say to them?
Yeah, so I definitely have a more long-term horizon than, like, I guess a lot of the traditional crypto people. I see it really coming into play in monetary regimes in the next like 10 to 20 years, no sooner than that. And I think, there's a lot of mistrust in government. And there's also a lot of the world that's still very under development. And I think that is something I've seen so neglected in so many arguments, is the ease at which transactions can be made on, blockchain networks using cryptocurrencies, and the power that it gives to entrepreneurs, especially in the developing world. So I think that it's the reason why it's important to hold it is because we will see it sort of start to play into monetary regimes in the future. It's continuing to be a good store of value. And it's, sorry, what was the other part of the question?
No, just for all the people out there, there's such a small amount of people out there that I know in the U.S. I have, a lot of friends that, invested in a bunch of stocks, and let's say the people I play golf with or just hang out with that aren't traders, right? And like I said, I look at crypto in two ways. It's trading. I like to trade it. I'm not somebody who is in. I mean, I'm in it for the long haul as well. I don't actually have an exact reason or pricing to where I think it's going to go. I'm looking at it because I see all of these people much smarter than I am. And I've been in this industry for a long time. And I can tell you how many people in the derivatives industry have moved into crypto. It's crazy. So I say, you know what? I've been buying it and putting some of it aside. Majority of it I'm trading. But to the people out there in the US that have money, why should they buy crypto? What's the investment? How does it come in and impact them? Like, how does it become part of the US's financial system?
Yeah, so I could see it being, an additional digital asset coming in sort of to replace the gold standard is the strong argument, because it has displayed the characteristics of sound money. When you look at crypto, like Bitcoin, for example, has, a maximum. Like, there'll only ever be 21 million Bitcoins. And perhaps maybe that's not the perfect currency for the United States because you don't want, a monetary base that's completely fixed. But the deflationary aspects of crypto are very appealing, especially in times like now when you look at the, M2 and rising inflation since, 1913, since the Fed's creation. Crypto has shown to be very valuable in that sense in monetary regimes. So it could be the new gold standard somewhere down the line. But as for right now holding it, I don't see it decreasing in value anytime soon. So even if it weren't to become, a complete regime in the next 10 years, I think it will prove to be a very good store of value. Why? There's a lot of, I think, movement into it, and there's a lot of belief in it because of the decentralized nature of it. And I think like anything, like a lot of the traditional arguments against it are like, oh, well, it only has value because people say it does. That's really the argument for anything, though. Crypto has proven to actually create productivity. So we have jobs coming out of crypto. You have things like storefronts on the blockchain network. NFTs, I know that was sort of a big topic with the whole digital art front, but you saw that there were actually these transactions where people saw value and traded on it. So I think for me personally, it's a hedge against inflation. I see it playing a vital role in future monetary regimes. And I think because of its deflationary nature, it will continue to hold value as more people become interested in it. It's just a matter of scarcity. I feel the same way as you. I mean, that's really what kind of the basis for my theme and why I'm owning it. And it's a momentum thing. We talk about the numbers, and when I just look at the numbers, there's so few people I think that still even know how to buy this yet. Oh yeah. I mean, right? I mean, Coinbase has so many customers, but when you really look at the masses of people, I look at it as they don't know how to even get it. You know how many people still ask me how they're like, oh, you're trading Ethereum? How do I buy it? Yep, same, yeah. And you're just like, I mean, the barrier of entry into crypto is still difficult. I mean, I have a few crypto, more than a few, but it's like to open up these accounts, the text messages, all these different things you have to go. Right, you're going, this is absolutely ridiculous. And Binance, even last night I was trying to get into my Binance account, but I accidentally went to the not US one. And so I kept trying to change my password, and they were like, you have 4 attempts left. I know. The Binance one is like, when you go in there, then they say this thing, that I forget what the message was a while back. I had to go to Binance.us. But and I look at that and I say to myself, if it's doing this now, and I like looking at headlines to coincide with technicals, because when I look at Ethereum, my basis for the initial trade was, and this was a couple of months ago where I started to get pretty heavy into it. I just kept seeing headlines come out. And more talk about it. And I'm going, okay, a lot of times when you see things like this, you go to the chart and you look to see what the technicals look like. And the technicals looked extremely strong to me. So I said, okay, if we continue to get positive headlines with these good technicals, the momentum is there behind it. I'm always somebody who believes that when you have those two working together, headlines, and they just keep popping out. Like yesterday, it was something about Goldman.
I don't know if it was put out a 2-year Ethereum treasury bond, something. I'm botching this. I don't know what it was. I didn't read too much about it just yet, but they're just, you keep seeing headlines. Visa talked about Ethereum. And when I saw that, I was going, okay, I'm buying more. And that's what it is. And we're in a world of momentum now. I mean, look at everything we see. So I look at it and go, right. I mean, that's kind of my thinking is, I don't know. I mentioned this a little bit. I don't know exactly. I can't tell somebody, oh, this is exactly why I own crypto. This is exactly why I think this is going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen. I got to manage some risk. I'm going to own some for the long term. Right now, it's a hot thing. Does it last? I don't know. But for now, it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Visa did just come out and say they made a comment. I wasn't able to read the whole thing, but they made a comment on how crypto is very promising for cross-border transactions, which again is addressing those development issues. It's really hard to send cash to an economy where inflation is 1,000,000%. So yeah, I think it's definitely promising in that sense, and it really does boil down to the issue of scarcity. Bitcoin is a scarce resource. There's only ever going to be a limited supply of it, very similar to how gold is a scarce resource. Which of course we can mine and we can make new discoveries, whereas with Bitcoin, it's truly fixed.
I'm with you. And, before I let you go today, I guess I just want to kind of just walk back everything we talked about. Give us the landscape that you currently see in the market, just to summarize kind of what we talked about today and where you see the investments right now for what you're seeing, and also talk about to where, whatever it is that you're seeing right now, your theme, to where what would be starting to happen to where you may start changing your mind. Because there's one thing I look at as a trader and as an investor. I like understanding the theme, but most important to me, when that theme, how does that theme break? How does that theme change? So talk to us about that.
Yeah, so I think the overall theme is this really high level of growth we're going to see in the United States. I think that the Fed projected it at about 6.5% growth, which we haven't seen in 40 years. So super high growth. Monetary base is also increasing. They projected inflation at 2.5%. We've already seen the CPI bump above that. My projection was always between 3 and 5%, with the hope that it's transitory. And that by 2022, 2023, we see, productivity back to normal. We see employment, back to, it's between 2 and 4%. And the Fed tightens up policy. We see interest rates no longer near zero, probably upwards of 1 to 2%. And we're, back to like that pre-pandemic healthy economy. So right now I'm looking a lot at tourism, just because that was the industry that was most hit. It's still, struggling to rebound, but I think we will see, especially for short-term gains, we will see, a nice spike in transportation, cruises, hotels, all of that, all on that front. Going into crypto as a hedge from inflation. And then once things start to tighten up again, I think it'll be really interesting to see what industries have survived and what industries are really strong. Something we didn't really touch on is the fact that tech is deflationary. So we do have these opposing mechanisms where, we are in the age of technology. We have all these great new innovations and, technology moving to Austin, Miami, and tech is a deflationary force. So probably moving into technology, portfolio-wise, would be my, once I get out of transportation and crypto, going to technology would be probably, if the Fed really does tighten up policy pretty dramatically, as their dot plot seems to show, really going from 0 to like 3%.
The dot plot. I don't even know where to begin with that. Why did they ever even start that? Did they ever really follow? I mean,
right? Yeah.
It's like I remember pulling this up and going, what am I looking at here right now?
Right.
Really? I mean, how long did they follow that for? I don't remember. It wasn't long.
No, it completely changed. The ones they had in December had completely shifted with their increased expectations.
Yeah, final thoughts just before I let you go. I know we talked so much about crypto, and I know a lot of people are probably thinking, what other cryptos are you in? Bitcoin, Ethereum, we talked a lot about those. What other ones are you looking at? I think you named one of them, maybe two of them, but name those cryptos. And also, where do you go to get some ideas for these new cryptos? Because there's one thing for me, I find that it's overwhelming now how many new coins are out there. I can't figure out which one is the good one versus the bad one. That's why I've really stayed mostly on Bitcoin and Ethereum, and I'm no crypto expert. Like I said, I'm just a trader who looks for opportunity, and I've bought some other cryptos, but a lot of those are from recommendations from my crypto friends, and I read about them and I say, okay, I'll allocate X to this. But which ones are you looking at now, and where do you go for a resource?
Yeah, so like I said, I'm mostly in Bitcoin, Ethereum, looking at places like Solana, FTX, and Zilliqa. And then I've also found, for myself, just looking at companies so I'm in this one called VersaView, for example, very, very small. Like if you see it's super tiny, and I'm holding it for the long run, but it's essentially a company that's trying to move rewards programs to the blockchain. So a lot of times when I, look at cryptos, I look at the overall structure, what the goal of the project actually is, whether or not I find that viable, and whether or not I see that having some sort of long-term strength.
Got it. No, I appreciate you sharing that with us. I got to tell you, Allison, this was a blast. I know that you relatively new to Twitter, and you came on the scene. And like I said, I'm like, she's smart, she's funny, and it was great to be able to get a chance to get to know you better. Even more impressed with you after I got a chance to speak with you today. I know that you write a Substack. I'm a subscriber to it. You put out some good content on there. Tell everybody where they could find you on Twitter, and a little bit about your Substack.
Yeah, so my Twitter handle is Allison Reichel. My Substack is rationalreasoning.substack.com. And I try to do, when I'm not traveling, it's a twice weekly newsletter. Mondays are focused on macro. I have little macro Mondays where I talk about, whether or not the Fed said anything, or just general macroeconomic projections, whether or not what's coming out of the White House. I know Biden just had his jobs plan. I talked about that. And then on Fridays, I try to either do a finance feature. So I talk about companies that I see coming onto the fintech sphere that I think are important, or just what's going on in the markets. Sometimes I do aviation, since my dissertation is on aviation, but I try to keep it mostly macro focused, and just really sort of condensing these really complicated economics concepts and topics, and making them easily readable to the everyday person.
Yeah, I mean, I think you do a great job at that. And like we said from the onset, I mean, I read your Substack and following you on Twitter. You really you're way ahead of the game, I think, than most people I've talked to your age. And like I said, I'm really impressed with you today. Everybody's definitely got to go and follow you on Twitter and check out your Substack. I highly recommend it. I know I've definitely learned some stuff from you in that letter and from you today. Thank you again, Allison, so much for joining me on Futures Radio Show.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to Futures Radio Show. If you enjoyed the show, please leave a 5-star review on iTunes. Never miss an episode. Go to anthonycrudele.com and get on our email list for show notifications and for free content that is exclusively for subscribers. Also on anthonycrudele.com, you will find tons of videos and education on trading futures, options, and crypto. Past performance is not indicative of future results. Opinions expressed are solely my own and my guests, and they do not express the views or opinions of my sponsors. Futures Radio Show is produced by Crudele Productions.